questions.
Thank you, sir. Distinguished senators, I will again take the questions one after the other. The first question was on the subject of Naira devaluation or, currency devaluation, and I was asked what's my take on this. I had begun to sort of comment on this in my earlier comments, but let me just reinforce a few points on it in the interest of time. One is, the way to think about the currency and where somebody's currency is valued is a demand and supply issue. And there are points on both sides. My sense is that while one could manage one side, the best practice and the best way to do it is to manage both sides of the equation. Work at those things that will create increased supply of foreign currency, and then obviously create an opportunity for those that want to demand it. I believe that the concern that the present government has is that, without doing enough to address the things that increase supply, that if you continue to devalue the currency, that you might not get the benefits that come from a devalued currency, which is increased exports and so on and so forth. My view is that that has to be a central part of this vision that I talked about, an economic vision, at least for an administration like the current one, to think in terms of how do we make sure our policies, monetary policies, fiscal policies, and the entire economic vision for the country are all working together, because these are tools, to be honest. That's what they are. They're tools of managing an economy. And you can't actually deal with it in isolation. And I believe that the comments that were made by the former central bank governor is a point of view that reflects, frankly, what a lot of people think. But there is also there are also other factors you have to take into account as you design the economy. And I believe that that's something that will be a very important assignment that we'll have as we go into government to work on it. But it's not something one can take a view on without actually looking at all the factors that are at work when you're dealing with currency management. But every country has to manage its currency. On the subject of high interest rates, I'm a great believer that we need lower interest rates to stimulate industry and for a better economy. However, without getting into any technical jargon, there is a trade-off between interest rates, currency rates, and all the other factors. One of the reasons why interest rates are high may well be that the currency, if you lower the interest rate, will come under even greater pressure. So the thing to keep in mind is that you have to look at this thing as a whole system, but I do believe that the direction has to be in favor of lowering interest rates, because it creates employment, it improves industry, and therefore I will give priority to things that will tend to lower interest rates over time while creating a macroeconomic stability. On the question about the use of consultants in the TSA, I share the concern of the distinguished senator that if indeed somebody is collecting 1% of a huge amount of money, then you clearly want to understand why and how. And my understanding is that the government is actually looking at it. So it's not something that I'm in a position to sort of get into now, since I've not been briefed in any way. But I believe that the government will address it, but it's a legitimate concern and a legitimate question to ask. And on the question of why rely on foreign investors when we have local investors, is again a very sound observation. In fact, as it turns out, the foreign investors tend to take a cue from the local investors. So if you have an economy where the locals are taking their money out, I think it would be naive to expect that the people will be bringing their money in, because they will believe that those people know something they don't know because of information asymmetry. They're closer to the economy. Therefore, if we're going to be a sound government, we have to create an environment for our own people first to invest, and then create the confidence for the foreigners to follow suit. So again, I do agree that whatever we're doing, local entrepreneurs must benefit from it.
Senator Nazim. Thank you, Mr. President.
I represent Bauchi North. Mr. Ministerial nominee, you have spoken very well. You are indeed very versatile and highly multifunctional. You have answered so many questions, you've evaded some. We are more concerned today on political issues. And my sister put a question to you, you evaded. You are nominated a minister from Abia State. My question is, I want you to tell this Senate and indeed Nigerians in broad terms, how would your appointment as a minister of the government of the Federation add value to the people of Abia State? Direct. I asked him, I have the floor. That's one. Mr. Nominee, lack of maintenance culture in Nigeria by Nigerians have reached an alarming proportion. Its effects on public properties and other properties have affected government at all levels. How would you solve this problem? Number three, again, there is an endemic practice within the banking sector. You're an accountant and a doctor, where some banks are of the habit of employing beautiful single ladies, giving them outrageous targets. We're talking about ethical corruption here. These ladies do not even know how to balance an account, but yet they are giving outrageous targets, and this has given a lot of exposure to prostitution, and some of them call it executive prostitution. This is the government of change. What is your take on this? How do we solve this problem? Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Matthew Rogidi.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, my name is Senator Matthew Rogidi, representing Edo South. Well, the presentations you have made thus far, I want to say it has been a very good exposure. But I think as a minister, excuse me, there's a lot you have to contribute to the well-being of the federal government. But you'll find out that over the years, budgeting in Nigeria has become an annual ritual. Because there's huge disparity between what is achieved at the end of the day and then of course the figures that are bandied. So much so that MDAs fall on each other. Either the minister that is in charge of finance or the minister that is in charge of the economy. Everybody wanted to get releases to be able to meet with the obligations that were intended when the budget was put in place. You will see that a lot of the agencies of government, particularly health institutions, that had money intended in their budget, when it comes to actual releases, they don't have this money to execute capital projects. Please, how are you going to advise government, federal government, to be able to narrow the difference in actual terms between those figures that are put in budget at the beginning of the year, and then of course what we now have, available for development? That's number one. Number two, I see that you have a lot of experience, particularly outside this country. It's no more secret that a lot of Nigerians have huge accounts outside this country. And recently, KYC has been conducted on accounts of Nigerians, notable Nigerians. And some of these banks, HSBC, Barclays banks, and the rest, they too are bothered to say, those of you whose sums or whose revenue we cannot very well verify, they have given the checks. These checks are in the hands of some of us, some Nigerians, wanting to lodge, or where to lodge these checks. And for fear of this present government, that they will be prosecuted. A lot of these monies are hanging in the air. Will you advise that the federal government grants them amnesty so that this, within 6 months, so that these people can make their lodgement in Central Bank of Nigeria, and that Nigeria can take the benefit of well over $400 billion that we can recover from these persons who have been saboteurs and their cronies too, that are even stealing this money from them. Because you know, we need a lot of money to be able to cost development in Nigeria. So will you advise federal government to grant economic amnesty to these people who have these huge sums in their possession? Thank you.